Outside Alberta's capital city of Edmonton lies Enoch Cree Nation, a small community comprised of 2,600 members. I am one of them. There are many stories that have been kept from me and my people about this place we call home. Recently, one of those stories has been uncovered, and a secret that has been buried for decades has changed the community forever.
When I started in the archives, I was around 24 years old. I had a passion for it, but I also had a really good gift of remembering.
A serious incident in 2014 unexpectedly forced the closure of two crucial pieces of the nation, sparking confusion and concern from many of its members. Searching for answers has led me to Jared Morin, who has spent the last few years trying to uncover the truth.
A lot of the historical stories of Enoch was we had a lot of medicine out here. One of the names that are coming back is the original name of Enoch, Muskegsa, medicine lands.
You know, my dad has this principle that he passed down to me that land is forever. You know, we're not going to be here in 50, 20, 30 years, some of the people 100 years from now, but that land will still be there. This land was chosen by our chiefs because of that lake. It's Muskegsic, land of the medicines, for a reason. And there was a lot of medicine around that lake. There's a lot of medicine in our sandhills. And for 70 years, there hasn't been a lot of medicine taken in Enoch. There hasn't been the enjoyment of that lake, and the lake is basically no longer existent. People need water to survive. Now we have literally no access to a natural source of water. We depend on others to bring water into our nation. Well, World War II happened. Canada joined the war effort basically immediately in 1939. At that time, the Canadian Air Force was looking for practice bombing ranges to train its pilots for the war effort.
They needed, training facilities, training lands. They used a lot of the First Nations. It was just the easiest, fastest route possible. Pretty much just had to go through the Indian agent with a stroke of a pen.
Until the 1960s, Indian agents were the Canadian government's representatives on First Nations reserves. These agents, who were usually outsiders, lived on reserve and enforced the provisions of the Indian Act. Many of the roles of the Indian agent were related to the assimilation and control of the First Nations people.
For the Indian agent at the time, he declared this lake a swamp, a muskeg, that our people didn't use it. He took the initiative and basically signed off 2 sections of our nation's land. There's a lot of sad chapters in our history. We had a lot of incidents of corrupt Indian agents burning and destroying documents, records.
At the time, the Indian agent was able to easily lease the land to the Department of National Defense without the consent of the nation. An existing lease from World War I was the only legal document needed to use the land.
So where we're standing is the end of the rifle range. This is where the military used our lands during World War I. Some of the elders that did share their stories, they said they would hear weapons from morning till nighttime. They didn't know some of the fighting was being engaged here. There's an old barrel drum over there that it's shot to hell. A lot of the things that happened out here during the war, still here.
In 1941, the government of Canada took a lease of 2 sections of land on the Enoch Reserve, and they did not follow the procedure set out in the Indian Act of having the citizens of Enoch vote. They then proceeded to use these 2 sections as a practice bombing range.
The easiest place to go for the federal government at the time was, we'll go bomb First Nations reserves. They illegally took leasehold of the heart of our bands, and from 1941 to 45, they bombed the heart of our nation.
I think this lake would have been at least 15 to 20 feet deep, that we actually had an island in the center point of this lake, and that's where they actually did a lot of the bombing. And the new pilots that they were training, some of them weren't even close to being experienced. So a lot of these bombs were dropped, you name it, left, right, and center. They used howitzer shells, napalm gas jelly bombs, and they did some sort of chemical weapons demonstration out here. Tragic side of everything was our people couldn't leave the reserve right until 1962 or 65, and we had to just endure it. Hearing bombs go off night and day, to hear the planes, to read the newspapers of what was happening overseas, and also worrying about some of our nation members that served during the World War.
In the late 1980s, the Enoch Cree Nation opened up the Indian Lakes Golf Course, which quickly became the heart of the community. It was a place of social gathering, community events, and an introduction to the workforce for many of the residents, including myself.
Well, just to my right is the compound where they kept the golf carts. Most of the times, the younger kids that were getting into the workforce, that would be their jobs to maintain, clean, wash, pull up the carts. In front of us here is the driving range. Majority of us kids, if the golf course was busy that day, we'd go and practice, do some trick shots, longest drive, put a little money on the line, and just have some fun. This was our summer. This was our summer hangout. It's the younger generations that are really missing out.
That golf course was much more than just a golf course. It's where families gathered to come eat. It was where families came to work. Their moms and dads and my cookums and mushums used to work there. Now when you drive by it, it's just a bunch of weeds and an old derelict building, and it's an eyesore, unfortunately.
In the summer of 2014, an employee of the golf course uncovered an unexploded ordnance while doing maintenance on the property. This discovery would destroy what had become an integral part of our community.
He had a lot of ancestors watching over him. He actually struck the UXO with the shovel. The nation didn't know what to do. The nation didn't know if we were liable or if the people who dropped it were liable. The army, they came out and I think they deactivated it on site. And that's somewhat the start of the whole process of what did transpire here.
Is that a coyote or is that a bird?
It's a coyote, yeah. The trickster. When they start finding the UXOs and some of the ordnance, it wasn't in the front of the development, it was more towards the back. And with these anomalies, our people were not trained, they were not aware of what these things were. Keeping a golf course operational on a bombing range that was used during the World War, that was a very high risk for the council. Thank the Creator that, nobody was injured. There's no accurate record of how many bombs were found, how many UXOs or debris. A lot of people were concerned for their safety, for their children's safety. They didn't know where the bombing took place. And a lot of the people from visiting nations would actually camp here. And when they were lighting up fires, they were finding anomalies as well.
Concerned for the safety of our people, Enoch's chief and council began their search for the truth. They called upon the federal government to remove the UXOs and restore the lands to their natural state.
Basically, the D&D were stating that they cleaned 100% of the island, that there was nothing left within 3 feet, 1 meter. It just so happened that we came out and we came across an ordnance just perched up just off to the side of the island. So that anomaly was on the surface. The Canadian practice bombs still contained over a pound of dynamite. If a child were to grab that, I mean, we all know what a firecracker can do. I don't even want to know what a pound of dynamite can do.
Sadly, there was no acknowledgement of the danger from the government and no effort to remove the unexploded ordnances. And in 2014, the council was forced to close the golf course and move the powwow from the traditional grounds.
There was literally bombs found in our old powwow grounds. The other site was not along a highway. It was picturesque. It was more natural. It was again beside our lake. It was more private because powwow is a ceremony at the end of the day. And now you walk down to those powwow grounds and it's falling apart. It's turned into a place of regret and a source of pain and what could have been for the nation. Our World War II bombing range in the heart of our lake really set us back.
We've always had to juggle and relocate things, not by our choice, but because of, these situations that were brought upon us.
In the early days of 2015, back when I was on council, 2014, very challenging to deal with the Department of National Defense. It was even tough at the start to get a meeting, to get a face-to-face contact, to get back to the table. So we reevaluated things. We came up with a new team, which included a new legal firm, Parley McLaws and Ed Molstad, who has been very successful with other First Nations in negotiating specific claims.
Shortly after we were retained, the Government of Canada agreed to negotiate the claim.
The relationship in 2014 and 15, in particular, when I inherited this seat and decided to lead this claim, it was very adversarial. It wasn't built on finding a win-win solution. It wasn't built on face-to-face, respectful dialogue. Through persistence, through looking at our team and really reflecting on, is there some things that we can do different?
People generally should be aware that the treaties included promises, both written and oral, to the First Nations people. They must look at their individual nation to determine whether those treaty promises have been kept.
Enoch's a small community. Our original boundaries were shortened throughout the years with the Indian agents and government at the time. The remaining traditional land that we have, I think it's only 26 sections of land, and that's not very much. We've lost a lot of history in Enoch, but on the upside of things, we're gaining that history back. And especially with the 94 calls to action, we actually used a lot of those to help us gain access for some of those records and to reclaim a lot of that history that's been lost. For the amount of money and for the things that did happen, I don't think you can put a dollar sign to it.
Sometimes there's an announcement of a settlement, essentially an announcement that a large sum of money is being paid to a First Nation. Sometimes people get the wrong impression because they don't know the history. They don't know the promises that were made pursuant to the terms of treaty. And sometimes it's not as significant as what it should be. Everyone has to know what the history is before they can assess whether a payment, no matter how large, is fair and reasonable.
I don't think it can ever be fair. I don't think any type of money is going to compensate us for the gathering places that we lost, the memories and the things that could have been. 70 plus years of having a World War II bombing range take out the heart of your nation, and the fact that we can all look each other in the eye and say, we dealt with it. It's not something that we can go back and write perfectly, but we've taken a step forward. I think this compensation needs to go towards creating a lasting legacy for the original intention of that lake. We need to, again, reestablish that gathering place, whether it's at the lake, whether it's rebuilding our golf course, to get together and be a family, more so. I grew up on that golf course. My late dad helped build it, and he was a greenskeeper there. If we build the golf course back or not, I'd like to think that he would be smiling down on me and saying, "You helped get something done for the nation." And for the former Power Grounds themselves, we've had really great discussions on should that be the hub of our Cree language and cultural retention, being our treaty house, being our history, our archives, being our gathering space for young kids going to learn how to dance, drummers coming together and practicing drumming. So I look forward to the future of the Power Grounds.
The recommendations that our elders have given us, future generations, is they would like to see this lake almost back to its natural state. To give the name back, Yekal Lake. In a meeting with the D&D a few years back, we requested to have some sort of sign stating that this was a drop zone. We still don't have any of those signs up yet. It does look like a war zone out here.
We have a long road to go to educate the public about First Nations history. And one of the things that came out of the Royal Commission report on Aboriginal peoples is the recommendations about education, not just of Indigenous people, but of all people.
I'm an Enoch Muskegsuck member first, but I am Canadian, and I am treaty, and this is Treaty 6 territory. If we settle this land claim and we prove that we can come together and right truly historical wrongs for a better future, I think that's what I want Canadians to know. I want them to know that Enoch donated the $500 we got from this illegal lease back to the war effort. We're all in this together. There was a wrong that happened to our people when we were put in this 4x5 mile box, but we do have a mutual history moving forward, and I like this action of reconciliation.